Come and join me in welcoming Dan Varroney, who's founder and CEO of Potomac Core. Dan, welcome back.
Thrilled to be back, Lars.
Tell my audience what Potomac Core is all about.
So we are a Washington, D.C. area-based trade association, market research, and strategy consulting company. We work primarily with trade associations.
Okay, very good. I want to talk about small business and where America finds itself right now, because it's nice to have the big name brand businesses, whether it's Boeing or IBM or Microsoft or Amazon or whatever. But the real growth in American jobs oftentimes comes from small business. And small business, it seems right now, is really tied up in red tape and a little bit stuck in today's economy. Would you agree?
That's absolutely correct. The administration has done a very good job improving incentives, especially on regulation and permitting. But the next step is critical. They've got to scale those reforms specifically for small businesses and also to fix how capital actually reaches them.
So what does the federal government need to do to make that happen? And how much of this fix has to come at the local level as opposed to federal regs and federal rules?
So I'm going to talk from a federal perspective for terms of this conversation. So I think there needs to be tiered compliance. So, for example, a 20-person manufacturer should not face the same reporting burden as a Fortune 500 company. Same safety or environmental standard, just simpler paperwork. From a permitting perspective, where there are low-risk expansions like new equipment, a small facility upgrade, a warehouse addition, they should get expedited review within 30 to 60 days, things like that.
And is it possible to make those changes with Congress, or does it have to be done by congressional action, or could it be done by the administrative agencies that are under the direct control of the president?
I think the president can do this through executive action. He can set an executive order and direct it. And at the same time, Congress could also make sweeping changes along these lines.
So why aren't they doing it?
You know, that's a great question. But I must say, Lars, that for a very long time, policymakers and the agencies have not been clued in to the importance and the impact of small business, right? 99.9% of the companies in this country are small business. On average, they employ 8 or fewer people. It's 45% of the economy. One might think that they're clued into the impact they're having on economic growth and employment.
Well, except that if they're not clued into that, Dan, do they really know how to do their jobs? I mean, if you're in an agency that writes rules and regulations or sets limits on companies, and you don't know the effect that you have on those companies when you write those rules and regulations, do you really know your job well enough?
No, you don't, Lars. And what we're living in is an administrative state that's really clueless with regard to how capital is generated, how jobs are generated, and how the economy flows.
So you have a bunch of people in agencies, and like an acquaintance of mine used to say, he said, ducks quack, dogs bark, and regulators regulate. So you got people who show up to their jobs, and their full-time job is writing regulations. And I don't think a one of them shows up at work one morning and says, you know, I think we've got enough regulations. Maybe today I'll look at taking down some regulations or modifying some regulations or rules to make life easier for everybody. It doesn't seem like that's anybody's job right now, and maybe it should be.
It absolutely should be somebody's job. It should be the job of the agencies, and that's why I think, at least in the short term, the president should write executive actions to create tiered compliance and fast-track permitting for small businesses. And here's another thing that I'll share with you. Do you know that we've got the Small Business Administration in competition with lenders? And it's amazing. You know, tax incentives don't matter if a small business cannot afford the loan to act on them. You've got small businesses.
Right.
The Small Business Administration granting loans. I don't think they belong in that business. I think they belong in the advocacy business for small businesses, not in the granting loan business. That ought to be done by the private lenders, by the banks, people who know how to rate loans and how to do this very well.
Well, in fact, Dan, I do agree with you. And this came up just the other day because when the idea came up that, oh, Spirit Airlines is in trouble, probably because of what Biden and President Otto Penn and his administration had done in denying the merger with JetBlue. And I've got no dog in the fight with either company. I don't own their stock. I haven't even flown on either one of them, at least in my recent memory. I haven't. So I've got no bias in that. But if you say, why should the government be on the hook, or the taxpayers be on the hook to provide them financing? And the answer I get from people sometimes is, well, nobody else wants to loan them money. I said, no angel investor, no person who wants to take a big risk for a big return. Nobody wants to loan them money. So now you want to give them some of the taxpayers' money? So the taxpayers only get to do the investments, so-called, that nobody else in the world wants. Does that sound like a good idea? Because it doesn't sound like a good idea to me. I mean, if you are that angel who says, I'll take the big risk, but I want the big return. But if they don't even want it, why would we want it?
So the answer is there are private lenders other than banks that might just take these companies on and grant them loans. The point is they may not be aware of them. But in this case, having the government directly engaged in private enterprise like this puts them in competition with community banks, private lenders, and banks. Yep. And I think that's a mistake.
I think that's a huge mistake. That's Dan Varroney. Dan is the founder and CEO of Potomac Core. Dan, it's good to have you on the program.